Well, hello. Welcome to 9 Angles for Forte. This is 3D Instruments SPAT CURVE. These are instruments to be played using a 3D sound system. So they are musically reactive to 3D sound. They're sample-based, meaning that the source is a 3D source, which is simply a better sound source, despite some people still don't want to believe it. But apart from being a better picture of sound, so to speak, there you react spatially in a way that depends on the musician and depends on dynamics. So you can create spatial rhythms, etc., while playing live. Now, this is a video tutorial, and it's going to be divided in 4 main chapters. The first one's going to be an overview of the instruments. It's a 16-piece library, 16 instruments. And so we're going to do an overview. Then we're going to do a demonstration of some of the instruments, what they can do, how they work. Then we're going to go through the output configuration, which is very important because without a proper output configuration, they would simply not work, neither for standalone nor for a DAW, right? So don't skip this part. And then we're going to go through DAW configuration using Atmos because it's a convenient way to represent this instrument. It is possible to do ambisonics as well, or channel-based, but that's reserved for a different video. Feel free to skip to any of these chapters, whichever you need. You go over it, and but don't skip the overview, because this is where you can learn what they can do, how they sound, and don't skip the output configuration, because otherwise it's impossible to make them work. So thank you. Welcome. We're going to start. Okay, so we're going to go on the overview of the library. We've got 16 instruments grouped in the following way. We've got 3D drums. This is one of the most important instruments. It's very reactive in different ways. The 3D sound, I'm going to explain this in more detail later. We've got 4 electronic instruments which have been resampled using 3D sound, mainly for keyboard, and they have their own set of rules, for example, using the modulation wheel, etc., to change the behavior of the sound. Then we have some orchestral-based samples, such as horns ensemble, trombones ensemble, bassoons ensemble. Then we have a 16-piece guitar orchestra sampled live, including bass guitars, etc. Then we have marimbas. They're called dimensional marimbas. Again, it's a 4-piece section of marimbas. And finally, we've got 6 pre-Hispanic instruments based on the Aztec and Mayan whistles. So in total, you've got 16 instruments, and together they present different enough timbres so you can compose a whole piece. For example, the 3D drums, you get a full mixer. You can mix kicks, snares, hi-hats, etc. There are some unusual things, such as you have a knob for snares, but also for spat snares. It means that, for example, some of the snares will sound frontal, while using a different note and obviously a different pad, you can move the snare around. Each hit is going to be a different position within the 3D field. Same for hi-hats. These hi-hats remain frontal, while these hi-hats are going to go all over, around, and above the audience. This is important because the drummer can decide if he or she plays frontal without moving things around, or play around and above the audience and do so rhythmically, spatial rhythms. It is important for me because that means that you don't have that much information during a concert or during a, I don't know, studio production session. Because if everything is moving around all of the time, our ears get tired very quickly. Toms are very interesting because they react according to dynamics. If we play toms in a soft way, they're going to sound left, right in the front of the system like any other drums. Still 3D sound, this is important, right? But if we play them loud, high dynamics, high velocity, they're going to move all over the crowd, all over the audience and above the audience. You also have a lot of effects, which, and this is common for all of the instruments. You can mix them or actually get rid of them entirely and process the sound in any way you wish. So if you get rid of all of the effects, what you will keep is a dry 3D sound source, is important, which you will be able to process in any way you like. So, well, you can also activate animation reacting to velocity, like we can see here. We can also simply allow a soft animation to flow continuously on the instrument. These are just visual effects. They're common to all of the 16 instruments. Or whenever you get tired, you can simply get rid of them. So, for example, that was the drums. I will play some more examples later on the demonstration and some live examples. But for now, let's go quickly throughout the other instruments. Regarding the electronic instruments, or fermions here, we can see that the modulation wheel right here is important. It will change the behavior. For example, if we go through, this is a bass, you've got two bass sounds, and you've got two other kind of lead sounds. So in this case, it's a bass, and we've got the modulation wheel all the way up. It means that each attack, right? It's kind of high pitch. The attack will come out from any direction within the 3D sound field, from an unpredictable direction. You will not be able to predict it, but the sustain of the sound is going to remain front. It's only the attack that's going to come out from somewhere, right? If you move the modulation wheel midpoint, you're going to have kind of a short note with a release that moves to the next speaker. But if you press the note softly with low dynamics, low velocity, that movement is going to be very short, perhaps to the next adjacent speaker. But if you use high dynamics, high velocity, that movement's going to go further. Speakers that are further away from the original point. So that is interesting. And if you use the modulation wheel all the way down, then you're going to have some kind of pad effect, an evolution of the sound, which is going to be moving around the audience softly, right? Much depends on the sound you pick up. This is similar. And if you use the module in the middle, you're going to have exactly the same behavior. And if you use the modulation wheel up, you're going to have a bit of pad going on, which is going to move around the audience very softly. Now, all instruments behave in a similar way. These are the electronic ones, which are synthesis created by me and then resampled, right? That's important. They're resampled electronic instrument. Now, if we go to orchestral ones, you were going to get some trombones, bassoons, and horns, right? If we pick up the horns, you will have to explore again all the way up with the modulation wheel. We're going to have a kind of a sustained note. If we put it kind of 3/4 up, we're going to have short notes. As you can see, it has a delay. Now, we're using a binaural translation. You should be probably using headphones for this tutorial. It gives you an idea, never as good as being inside a real physical multi-channel system, but all of these delays will obviously move around, and they will do so slowly if you use low dynamics, low velocity, and very fast and farther away if you use high dynamics or high velocity. All of these instruments are timbre creative. They do not intend to substitute real instruments, okay? And in the case of trombones, for example, we've got about 4 positions. The first one all the way down, we're going to get an upwards glissandi. If we go a quarter up, we're going to get the downwards glissandi. If we go somewhere in the middle, a little bit above the middle, we're going to get a short attack. And if we get, which moves fast depending on dynamics, if we go all the way up, we're going to get a sustained note, which is moving softly around the audience. And if we play the same note softly, it'll move slowly. If we play it very hard, high dynamics, high velocity, it's going to be moving aggressively around and above the audience. So that's just an idea, okay? In the case of cubistic guitars, what we've got is again, different positions in which soft dynamics will give you, this is a complete guitar orchestra. If we go 3 quarters up, we've got muted sounds. We go 1 quarter, it's a downwards glissandi, and if we go all the way down, it's an upwards glissandi. Right, and you can always kind of get rid of the effects, and you get a very dry 3D sample of the whole 16-piece guitar orchestra, right? And process it any way you like. Right, so that's nearly it for kind of orchestral samples or kind of acoustic instrument samples, but still marimbas are here. And what we've got is a 4-piece marimba around your ears. It's by definition harder to localize, but in this case in particular, as opposed to the other instruments which were very surround, a whole ensemble surrounding your ears, you cannot really localize the instrument itself. It's a very surround experience. In this case, there's a preference for one particular direction. In the case of the 4 marimbas surrounding you, so you will be able to localize the marimba very softly, and each note is going to come out from an unpredictable direction, which gives this instrument a very dynamic spatial behavior, so to speak. It'll never be boring because it's coming out always softly from a different direction. Right, you also have access to some effects, glissandi, etc., by moving the modulation wheel. And finally, on the pre-Hispanic ones, we've got 6 different little objects which you can use at will. And like, for example, ocarinas. For example, this is a Jaguar whistle. This is kind of a like an eagle little whistle. These are a couple of ocarinas. And another one. Then you've got an annoying whistle. And finally, a very interesting stick that again behaves a little bit like the marimba. Every hit is going to come out from a completely unpredictable direction. So it becomes a very dynamic way of creating spatial rhythm. Very, very dynamic, always interesting, etc. Okay, that's pretty much the overview of the library. Again, you've got 16 instruments. They're all 3D samples of real acoustic stuff, including the electronics ones that are resampled, and they all behave spatially and musically throughout a 3D sound field. Normally coming from musical dynamics, but also from specific notes that behave completely different, completely unpredictable, or actually completely predictable. So, for example, if we go to a demonstration, that was like the overview, we're going to use now, apart from the binaural rendering, which gives you an idea about space, we're going to use some visual clues, meaning you're going to be able to see the speaker that is actually carrying some sound. For example, this is a snare. And you can tell that all of the speakers lit up, meaning there was a hit coming, in this case, from the front, and a massive reverb surrounding you dynamically around you and above you. Let's hear it again, and let's see it again. Right, that's pretty much the behavior of the sound in represented visually in this case. If we go to the snare, SPAT snare, the way it's called in the mixer of the instrument, meaning snares that's going to move, we're going to see that there's a path. Every time the drummer hits this pad, the snare will be changing position on each hit. So you can create paths. Right? I'm going to play it again so you can see the sound, where it's coming from. Right. Meaning that, again, the drummer can remain frontal or have a secondary pad for a secondary snare that's moving, and choose when to move things around and when to remain frontal. So you have access to a proper, in my opinion, spatial performance, remaining frontal but still 3D. Now, for example, hi-hat is going to have a fixed frontal right direction, not moving. And see, that speaker in the front, the way it would probably be for any drum set. But then you have a different note. You obviously need a different pad for this, connected to that note, in which each hit is going to move, same as the snare. Right? So again, okay, you decide when to play spatial. Toms, as I kind of said before, they react to dynamics. If you play them soft, they're going to pan left and right at the front of the system, like maybe any drum set would do. Well, actually, like any drum set will do, except that the sound is 3D. It's not stereo. Right? But if the drummer hits the toms hard, high dynamics, high velocity, toms are going to fly. Again. Right? So this is dynamics based, and an important comment here is that every tom, it's 5 toms, will have a sequential order in space, but because they're all the same, it's enough for you to hit the first tom once and the second tom twice and the third tom 4 times for you to create a completely random experience in space. Now, before we move any further in this demonstration, I will play you a real concert in this studio by us using these drums. Okay? Ready. Right? That is a real drum set using this instrument playing live. So now we can take a look at the electronic instruments, which I already gave you an overview in the previous chapter. And let's see, for example, how would this look if we were able to see where the sound is coming from. In this case, it's a bass. And you will see a red light coming out of the speakers describing the path of the sound. Right? So it's a different instrument represented using a different color. The important thing is you can see the sound, where the sound is coming from. Let's hear it again. If you remember correctly, in this case, the keyboard player must have moved the modulation wheel to change the behavior of the instrument. At first, it was some high-pitched attacks with short movements. The attacks are coming out randomly from any possible direction in space. You cannot predict it. But then the sustain of the sound will come out from a specific speaker and immediately move around. But then the modulation wheel was moved all the way down, and you can create a kind of a pad sound and a slowly evolving sound that is going to move softly around the audience. As you probably remember, there are 4 electronic instruments. I'm just explaining quickly a bass instrument. There's also a lead instrument. And for that, I'm going to play, again, a video by us in concert live here in this studio. All right. Right? So what happened there was that this lead instrument would be reacting with the modulation wheel up in a completely random way, coming out from completely random positions. And then moving the modulation wheel would allow me to make the sustain slowly move around the audience and even create spatial pulses. When I move the modulation wheel all the way down, which I'm not sure if you were able to see it in this video, I created a spatial pulse that is moving front and back with a specific BPM, 120, with a specific rhythm, which you can then accelerate using the expression slider on the keyboard, right? That's exactly what happened. So it means that while you're playing live, you have to learn your instrument, you will have to learn its capabilities, and you can move the modulation wheel and change completely the character and the spatial behavior of the instrument, and obviously play accordingly, hopefully in a musical and very interesting way. Up modulation wheel is going to mean the same glissandi, but in a different direction, upwards or downwards. Then 3/4 of your modulation wheel up, it's going to mean a strong attack with effects that will move around you. And then all the way up modulation wheel, it means it's going to be a sustained sound that's still going to move around the audience and above the audience, above you or whatever. and it's going to do so slowly with low dynamics and low velocity, and quickly with using fast, strong dynamics or high velocity. So let's listen to this. Right? See, the 4 positions of the modulation wheel took place during the same gesture. It sounds organic. It changes the behavior of the instrument across space. It changes its timbre, its attack as well. So you should be able to play with them live. You can get rid of the effects and keep the absolutely dry original sample, 3D sample, and process it any way you like. And the result is, as you would expect, the same sound as before, but without effects, right? And you process it the way you want. Okay, so we now move into the output configuration chapter. This will be chapter number 3. It's very important because otherwise the instruments will not work. Simple as that. These are 3D instruments and they need a special output configuration, which you can download from our webpage or you can configure it yourself. But you need this both for standalone and DAW applications. Right, so we can see an example here of the output configuration that you will see once you open an instrument in Kontakt. All of the instruments were configured using a Kontakt player, and they're sold as such for Kontakt via native instrument. The very left, we've got channel, which is a multi-channel slot using 16 instruments, which is called Naff matrix. The reason why it's all the way to the left, it's because this way you can make sure that when you open any of these instruments, Kontakt will immediately select this output as default. If you don't have this multi-channel output, the instruments will not work. Now, what it's really at work are the following 17 channels that you can see here. 1, 17. Each of these channels represents a position. Obviously, I've used my own terminology here. It's very simple to translate this into a Dolby's terminology, in particular via the panning option. Once you have it very clear which position is which, for which we need to see the manual and to see the exact angles and distances for each speaker and position, it'll be very easy to configure. But this is the second part of the output configuration, and it's very important because using a DAW, your inputs are going to come from exactly these 17 channels, right? Then you have a third final part of the output configuration, which is divided into Naff dry master and Naff wet master. These are also very important because this is why and how you can control the level of effects on each instrument, get rid of them, or on the contrary, get a completely wet sound, no dry original sampling, or the opposite, right? And you absolutely need this, right? We can see that the sound is actually coming out of this output. So, and this way, you can actually move, balance the dry-wet knob as you like. Now, under each of these channels, you've got different numberings. I'm not going to go through these. You need to be a little bit of an experienced Kontakt user to understand it. It's going to be a little bit boring. This is completely and thoroughly explained in the manual. It doesn't make much sense to explain it here because these are the type of things that you just don't want to remember. You just want to go into a piece of paper and see what it is and use it and forget about it. But a very quick overview will be Naff matrix goes from 1 to 16. This is, 1 to 17, right? This is 17 positions, but it's actually 16 channels. Don't ask why. The 1 to 17 are going to come out using the plugin number 1, plugin number 2, 3, blah, 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 sequentially in order. The Naff Dry Master has a very, very specific configuration in which if you ignore these numbers and you just pay attention to my numbers, you'll see that we go from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. We jump number 12 and we go to number 13, 14, 15. We jump 16 and we go to 17. This is because this is the actual dry sample and it uses 15 positions, right? But if we go to the Naff Wet Master, you're going to see that we go all the way 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Ignore the number that Kontakt is assigning to it because that's only going to confuse you. Use my numbering. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So far, so good, but we skip 15 and then go through 16 and 17. Those are the effects. And together they create 17 channels, but all of these slots have 16 channels. This is because Kontakt will not allow more, right? So it was a way to outsmart Kontakt and use the actual multi-channel dome system. Okay, so all of this is thoroughly explained again in the manual and with graphics, with tables, etc. This is just simply an overview. I hope it gives you an idea, but bear in mind, you need this. Otherwise, the instruments will not work neither for standalone nor for DAW applications. All right, so welcome to chapter number 4, which is an Atmos configuration using Pro Tools. It is possible to configure these instruments using Ableton Live, Logic, and Reaper. I've done it myself. Possibly in the near future, I will be releasing videos explaining this, but there's no point in this case because it's pretty much the same thing. So it makes sense to give an example using Pro Tools, just because it's, industry standard, although nowadays I actually use Reaper because of its amazing routing flexibility. And but also in relation to Pro Tools, because I'm using Atmos to translate these instruments and they work beautifully. You can also use ambisonics, or you can also go channel-based. That is possible. So we're now here. This is what I showed you in the first chapter of this video in order to give you the overview. Now let's go a little bit inside each folder. All of these folders are exactly the same. You get first a instrument track in which you insert Kontakt 7. You cannot insert a multi-channel Kontakt instrument. You can, but not enough for these instruments, not properly 3D. But it's best to insert a mono Kontakt instrument. You upload your instruments here, and you actually need no input. This is the place where you're gonna write MIDI. Like, for example, go to Edit Window. You're going to see that this is place where I write MIDI. I'm sorry, I'm right here. Get rid of the grouping. In this place, write your MIDI. Okay? That is this channel. It needs no object out. It needs nothing but to play Kontakt. But the following 17 channels very important. They're audio channels. They all belong to each of the 17 output positions that I just explained in the last chapter in the output configuration, right? I have a quick look again to remind you. You get 17 mono channels here, 1 to 17, right? Those are your inputs. All of these. Those are your plugin inputs either in Pro Tools or Logic or Reaper or you name it. So for example, you can download this template from our webpage, of course, so we make it easy for you. But in case you have to configure it yourself, you need to remember the positions: front left, front center, front right, right, 8 positions in the horizontal plane, another 8 positions in the vertical plane, 45 degrees above you, and a final fully vertical position above you, right? This would be a 17-channel dome system. And each of them has its corresponding plugin input. So if we got into the input, you'll see, what is the input of this channel? Well, it should be plugin. In this case, we're in the 3D drums instrument. It should be Kontakt 1FL, which is exactly what belongs to this little channel here, 1FL, right? It means front left at the horizontal plane position. And then you just keep going. You go to the next channel. It's named FC. You can name it however you like. Named FC, meaning front center. And you use the input. You look for the actual plugin that you're using, in this case 3D drums, and you select FC, right? Which again belongs this FC. This is super important, and you do it for the 17 channels sequentially. And then you just span, of course, you select an object for each of the channels. I'm not going to give a class about how to configure Atmos. That's a different tutorial, of course. You need to select an object for each of those. And then once you do that, you go panning option and you position the sound wherever it belongs to. You should remember that you need to raise the height of the sound all the way up from channel 9. From the moment you see the U up from left at this point, everything is panned all the way up. Regarding the other channels, you can play how high you want them. I decided to go midway up. I think it actually sounds better, but you could go all the way down if you prefer. Just play with it and see what sounds best. But once you have configured that, or just download this template, as simple as that, but probably one day you'll have to configure it yourself. Once you have this, you group them into a folder, and then that's it. You've got your instrument. Simple as that. As soon as you start, playing, log in a drum set, MIDI drum set, and you play whatever you like, and it's gonna come out in 3D, not only as a 3D sample, where it's gonna behave musically within a 3D sound field. You can create spatial rhythms live while playing traditional musical instruments such as drum sets and keyboards. And since these are MIDI instruments, if you want to go and explore sensors instead of traditional musical interface, you can do it as well, so long your sensors can read MIDI. And that's pretty much it, because the rest of the channels are exactly the same, right? You can duplicate them or just simply download our template. Okay, so that's it for today. We've covered like an introduction, explaining what the instruments are, 3D sound samples. 3D sound is best, is better than stereo. No matter what other people say, our ears are naturally 3D. 3D audio is simply better, at least in enclosed spaces. They do behave within a 3D sound field rhythmically, according to dynamics, according to rhythm. So it's up to you to create music with this instrument. We've gone through a demonstration of the instruments using lights on the speaker, so you can not only hear the sound but see the sound moving, because we're using a binaural translation, obviously. There's nothing as good as being the middle of a full 3D physical system. Binaural rendering can give you an idea. But in this case, we use the lights in the speakers to give you a visual idea of where the sound is coming from. Then we went through the output configuration, which I insist is very important. Without that, it doesn't work, neither for standalone Kontakt nor for a DAW. And finally, how to configure this in an Atmos session, which can be done using Ambisonics, can be done using a channel-based system, but Atmos is just simply convenient and translates the instruments, the 3D field, beautiful. For now, that is all. Stay tuned for future instruments. These are the first 16 instruments published by us, 9 angles for Forte. But more are coming, and they're very conceptual, based on physics concepts, based on very interesting ideas about actually reality of the universe, what the world is. So stay tuned for that, and also stay tuned for, obviously, other tutorials that will come out eventually for specific things, such as configuring an Atmos session with these instruments in Logic, or configuring a channel-based session in Reaper, very flexible Reaper, great program, etc. So I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope it's been useful, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.